Welcome to the Altered Attitudes podcast. Today we're joined by our guest David Wilson. David arrived at East Coast Recovery Treatment Centre in 2008 where he met our very own Lester Morse. David has since gone on to become a support worker and head chef at The Perfect Place to Grow, a cafe and training kitchen in Margate designed to help young people into full-time employment. His story is an incredible example of the possibilities that can come from addiction recovery. In this episode, Lester and David talk about the significance of building a strong foundation in recovery, the role of effective communication in healthy relationships, and the essential steps of making amends and forgiveness. They also explore the transformative impact of equipping individuals with the necessary skills and support, and how these people can go on to positively affect the lives of so many more individuals. We hope you enjoy this episode. Let's begin.
Hi David, good to see you mate, ain't seen you for a while. Thanks for doing the podcast for us. I've been hearing a bit about you. You've sort of, when was the last time I actually see you physically?
I think it's when I left ECR, so it's about 15 years ago.
About 15 years, so I've you popped up on my radar a few times over the years. I think you did that, boxing was the last time.
Yeah, thanks for sponsoring me.
That's all right, you can tell us how that went, how it felt. But so obviously the reason of the podcast is, for sort of doing it for people in recovery, but we always try and also find people with the theme of that recovery is possible, because I know it's very difficult for a lot of people to be in some form of abstinence-based recovery and how it pans out for them. And so stories like yours, I think, are quite valuable to people that, again, for myself, you think, if I give up drinking drugs, I'm just not going to have a life. And you sort of start discovering that nothing can be further from the truth. You actually get a life. It's the opposite. So,
Yeah.
So mate, I mean, it really would be great to sort of know where you are now, but I guess for the sake of the podcast, it'd be nice to sort of go back. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about sort of what led you into rehab, and maybe then talk from there until where you're at today.
Yeah, of course. I had I had a difficult childhood. I suffered with anxiety all the time. I was always worrying. I remember telling one of my friends at school that I was a worrier warrior. I just worried about everything all the time, especially stuff like reading out in class or things that would just make me really anxious, and I would shake and all that sort of stuff.
To sort of the environment that you grew up in, was that, would you say, where your anxiety was coming from, or do you think you just had something naturally going on wrong for you?
That's a good question, and I honestly don't know the answer. I did have stuff going on, but I had two brothers who didn't react in the same way, so I couldn't say.
Well, that is kind of like my overall belief. It's not kind of what happens to you, it is your response. And you can have three kids in the same family and they'll all be responding completely different to what's going on. But for your personal experience, did you not feel secure in that environment, your family?
No, I didn't feel secure. I just felt, like I say, I was anxious and worried all the time. And I think, when I went through that kind of teenage rite of passage where you drink cider in the park in the middle of the night on a Friday, where a lot of my friends, got sick and never wanted to do it again, it was the first time I felt some relief from that worry and anxiety. And so I wanted it all the time.
Yeah, alcohol's fantastic at getting rid of anxiety.
To begin with. I smoked some weed and drank, whenever I could, really, because it was the thing that made me feel all right. That I hear people say it a lot, that I was always uncomfortable with my own skin, but with alcohol, I felt okay with myself. And then I'd always loved drawing and painting, and I painted a lot as a teenager, and I got a lot of therapeutic value from that. And my dream as a kid was to become an art therapist. And so I went off to art school, but I was so involved in the, sort of drinking and drugging that I just never really got any work done, and I ended up dropping out. And then I fell into the hospitality world, and I worked in, pubs and restaurants. And it's funny because people often say, do you think the stress of kitchens led you to drinking? And I think that's a misconception. I think there is a lot of drug abuse and alcoholism within the hospitality world, but it can be quite chicken and egg. What came first. And I think maybe I was attracted to working in those environments because they offered that kind of. There was a warmth and a family ethos within the kitchen teams that I was craving. And yeah, there was, a lot of drinking and drugging going on, which also appealed to me because it was how I felt okay. So I worked as a chef it was probably about 8 years. And I did all right at it, but I was terribly, terribly anxious, and then trying to medicate that anxiety all the time with drinking and drugging, and the drinking and drugging escalated. So it got worse and worse. And I was constantly trying to drink enough to get rid of the anxiety, but not too much that I couldn't do my job. And I just failed at that over and over.
Sorry, Dave, did you ever go to the doctors? I guess you're in that phase to speak to a doctor or anyone about your anxiety, or did you not really make that known at the time?
I went to a doctor once, but I wasn't ready to admit that there was an issue, really. And I didn't want anyone to look at the drinking. I wanted to keep it secret because I couldn't imagine being without it. I just couldn't imagine a life without it. So the drinking, had escalated, and so I got into a position where I'd get a job, and it would last about 3 months before things would get out of control, and I'd get the sack, and then I'd be out of work for a little while, and then I'd find another kitchen and get another job, and then it went on like that for a few years. That sort of horrible roundabout of, and I'd go into these places with it's really embarrassing, but with this big ego, a bit like I thought I was like Gordon Ramsay in the Kitchen Nightmares. I'd go to their kitchens, and I'd tell them what they need to do with their menu. I'd tell them how what they were doing wrong and how I was going to fix everything, with all these big ideas and all the rest of it, and then I'd just do the same thing I'd always done, and within a couple of months I'd be subbing my wages before I got paid or stealing, and then they'd see that I'd ostracized all their regular customers because I'd taken off scampi and chips and put on some sort of squid ink risotto, thinking I was being clever. And then I'd get the sack, and then I'd do it all over again. And I sort of realised in 2008, I realised something had to change. And I'd love to say that I realised it was me that had to change, but I didn't. I thought it's my town, that's the problem. So I moved to London, and then things got really bad. My drinking escalated further. I was completely alcohol dependent, so I had to drink in the morning to stop myself from shaking. And I was drinking on the tube every morning on my way into this fancy gastro pub where I was working, and I couldn't manage really. My mental health got so bad that I was really just not very well. And one day on my way in, getting ready for work, I found a length of rope, and I just became convinced that God had sent this rope for me to end my life with. And so I put the rope in my bag, and I carried this rope around for a couple of weeks, and I was just waiting for a sign that was like, this is the right time to do it. And then one morning on the tube, on the way into work, there was a sign, there was a poster, and it said, "The time is now." And I thought, this is it. This is God's sign for me that I need to end my life. And I think underneath that it said, to buy a new sofa or something. But the place I was at in my head, I felt like everything was a message just for me. And
Sorry, David, can I just ask you a question there? Just at that point, what was you sort of amounts were you drinking, and what drugs were you using? Any drugs?
I was smoking a bit of weed, but not a lot. But mainly I was drinking, and I was probably drinking not far off a litre of vodka every day.
All right. So do you think you were like also going a bit psychotic?
Yeah, I was really, really unwell. I had sort of made that decision that I was going to end my life, and I just thought I just wanted to see my mum one more time before I did it. And I went back to my hometown to see my mum, and she looked at me when I got there, and she just said, "You need some help, don't you?" And because of the nature of the relationship with my mum, normally I would have said, "No, you need help." But this one day, I was so broken that I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Do you think you're an alcoholic?" And I said, "No." I said, "I think I've got alcoholic tendencies." And she said, maybe we should look and see if we can find somewhere just for you to stop just for a bit and get some help with it. And I think she knew that if she'd said, like, you need to stop forever, that I'd have just run a mile. So we went on her computer on the internet and found a treatment centre. And that was East Coast Recovery.
Oh, and that was obviously your first time in any treatment, or sort of acknowledging that there's a problem going on that you need some help for. And so tell us about that. How long did you come for?
So I came on the 14th of November 2008, and I was supposed to be there for 4 weeks, 28 days. And I think it was Dan, or it was a member of staff, said to my mum after maybe a week, "We think you should stay longer." And at the time I was very angry. I didn't trust anyone. And I thought, well, of course you'd say that. If you're charging money, then, I was so cynical and angry, and yeah. So I ended up staying longer.
Sorry, I think that's common for people when they come to rehab, because they've never done it before. They really don't know what to expect. And I think once they actually start learning what's actually happening to them, then it starts making some sense. And then at some point, hopefully, the light bulb goes on.
Yeah. I thought I might learn how to control my drinking. I thought, I don't know. I didn't know what to think. And those first few weeks were I found tough, and I was angry. And then as Christmas approached, I wanted to go home for Christmas, and I said to the staff that I want to go home for Christmas, and they said, no, you can't. And or they said, if you do go home for Christmas, when you come back, you've got to start at day one again. And I said, I don't want to drink. I just want to go and be with my family and have presents. And because I was so childish, really, I really, that's what I was thinking about, was getting presents. And the staff were brilliant, because they said to me, what about if you hand that decision over to the people you're living with in the ECR? And the thing is with that is that I'd become friends with everyone, because we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same position. So I did trust everyone that I was living with. And so in one of the group sessions, I asked the group, should I go home for Christmas? And they all said no. So I ended up staying for Christmas.
Bastards.
And I had the ump. But it was probably, the best thing that ever happened, because I think it was my first situation where I'd handed over my will over to someone else or something else that had my best interests at heart. And so it was, it was a big moment. And then Christmas morning, I was really sulking, because I wasn't going to be getting any presents, and I was so immature. And I came down the stairs.
I just want to highlight to people, because it's just so important, that bit, because again, it's like in the 12-step fellowship when they talk about higher power or God or whatever, but really it says a power greater than yourself. And what you demonstrated there was asking other people to share in your decision making process, instead of just doing what you want all the time blindly. That's a power greater than yourself. And so initially that when we call that practice, when we actually get clients to do that, make a decisional balance. Because it's like when you got a bit of a sick brain, it can't cure itself and it's making bad decisions. So initially, you're kind of the people that do well are them that actually help let other people share in their decisions, not tell them what to do necessarily, but actually, they just keep listening to themselves all the time. And so that's quite a profound moment. And again, it's a sign that you can see the people that recover, because they take that on board. It's them that carry on being stubborn and just, I'm going to do what I want, it's my life. They carry on their life keeps being run by their ego, and they carry on in their addiction.
So Christmas morning, I came down the stairs, and there were staff who were there who were volunteering. So they were giving their time on Christmas Day, not being with their families, to come and be with us. And I'm not sure who, I think maybe Sonia, or I don't know, but someone had bought me a Christmas present. And I just couldn't really believe it. And it was a woolly hat from Superdry, so it was a nice one. And I couldn't believe that people would do something for someone else for no gain for themselves, because that's how sick I was. I didn't understand that people would do anything for any reason other than their own self-gain. And so this hat just, I don't know, it just sort of changed everything really. It was only a hat, but I've still got it, and it's you know, changed my life. um, and so yeah, that period between Christmas and New Year, people always talk about that period as being a bit of a weird time anyway. But for me, it was that year. It was a really big time of change. I think I'd started to go through some of the step work in the treatment centre, and yeah, something was starting to shift for me. And I think realizing that people do things for reasons other than self gain, that sort of happened Christmas Day. And then on New Year's Eve, there was going to be a party, and I thought, oh, this is going to be shit. A party with no alcohol. And I remember there were all these bottles of like Fanta and lemonade and stuff, and I just I I was really uncomfortable in my skin, and it was like I'd gone back to being that 14-year-old boy before that first ever drink. I was anxious, I was worried, I didn't know how I was going to talk to anyone, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I thought, oh, do I put them in my pockets or do I put them behind me? And I was just really awkward and didn't know what to do. And there was music playing that I didn't like, and everything just felt wrong. And then a new client turned up in the rehab, and he was in a state. He was in a real state. This poor old boy. He was a big guy, and he got taken straight up the stairs, up to his room, right at the top of the building. And he wasn't very well. And I just thought, I had been listening in the groups, and I thought, this recovery stuff, it's about reaching out and trying to help the new person. And this guy just arrived, and I'd been there about 6 weeks, and so I got a pint of squash, and I went up to see him at the top. And I went in his room, and he was a big guy called Barry, and he was shaking badly because he was waiting for the doctor to arrive. And I just thought I could make him feel a bit better, because I could tell him that it's a nice place and the staff are nice, and it's difficult at first, but the doctor would come, and it turned out Barry was from the next town to mine, so we were from the same sort of hometown really, and we drank in the same pubs. We owed pub tabs to the same people, and which is a big thing because it was hundreds of miles away from where I lived. It was a quite a big coincidence, and it made Barry feel a bit better to have someone in a similar boat to him to talk to. And I sat with him for about an hour with his squash, and just until the doctor arrived to see him. And then the doctor arrived and gave him some medication so he wouldn't shake so much, and then I went back downstairs into the party, and all of that self-consciousness, awkwardness, anxiety, all that stuff had left me. I just, like by magic, and I just had a really lovely time at this party with no alcohol. And I just thought, there's something in this, and trying to do the right things.
Yeah, we had some good parties there.
I remember, Lester, you were playing the air ukulele to Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember that night. I remember that Barry. He didn't like it at all, did he?
No, he didn't. He didn't stick around.
No,
but,
I don't think he wanted to stop drinking.
Something else. Yeah, but something else that you said when I was first around was, I think I asked something about like success rates and sponsoring. And you said, well, as long as I've been sponsoring other people, I haven't had a drink. And it's, Barry's journey is Barry's journey, but I can only do me.
No, it's true, mate. Well, I think that, again, just talking on that point,
Um,
I think the foundation of the 12-step program really was not when Bill Wilson got sober. It was when Dr. Bob got sober, the second person, and what the difference was there. Because again, I sort of say this to people, it's like that they think, oh, in the 12 step they want you to believe in God. It's like, I don't think that's the truth, because even in that point, it says in the big book, it says that 50% of our fellowship were of this variety, which was either atheist or agnostic. But that also tells me that 50% of the people that also were drunk also believed in God. So believing in God don't get you sober. And so when Bill went to Bob, and Bob sort of said, well, what are you going to do for me? He said, look, I'm being a Christian, I'm in the Oxford group, what are you going to do for me? And he said, I'm not here for you, I'm here for me. I'm here to carry the message to you, because he got that, and I got that line from his wife Lois, that when he got sober trying to help people, and he said, no one else is getting sober, but she said, but you are, Bill. And I think people really don't seem to understand that bit of kind of what this is about. And again, it progresses from that, because just helping people, it is a blissful state, and they call it two-stepping, where you don't drink and help people, but that doesn't last much beyond sort of 5 years. You know, you need to move on to the next part of working the program and getting rid of self as much as you can. So I used to say this to people, it's like, in the early days, I help people to get out of self, because it does feel nice and it does get you out of self. But then I worked the program, which helped me get rid of self, at least clear a lot of it. So I used to say I used to help people to get out of self, but now I help people because I'm out of self. And there's a big difference in the development of that. And when you actually start helping people out of self, you're not doing it for a selfish reason. You actually start developing spiritually at that point, not just helping people. So it's not about believing in God, it's kind of how you believe in God is important to make it work for you.
Yeah, so I think, that between Christmas and New Year's, everything really changed for me. And I went from not wanting to be in rehab to then not wanting to leave. And I think that point where I didn't want to leave was when I was told, right, you're ready to go. So I ended up, I've been in for 10 weeks. And it's obviously, completely changed my life. I came out realizing that I wanted to
Sorry, David.
help others.
Sorry, just one more question there, because again, it's like because again, I think it's important for people to know, and maybe it's like listening to your story unfolds. It's like it sort of confirms that. Is that, see, my theory is for people that have a reasonable level of education and have jobs and that kind of thing, that they tend to start understanding about the 4 to 6 weeks mark. Before that, it's just a lot of noise, but it does take a good 4 to 6 weeks for people to start seeing what this is about, and actually starting to get what realizations that you were getting, that you were starting to see for yourself, kind of what was going on. And again, that's just the beginning of the journey, really. But I think without sort of passing through them gateways or them doors, whatever you want to call it, it makes the rest of the journey impossible. Because again, hopefully we'll find out as we talk to you, in 15 years you've been on quite a long journey that sort of changes as you go along, doesn't it? But if you keep getting them little nuggets and little developments as you go, it kind of allows you to keep going and growing and developing. But so I don't know if was that kind of your experience.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it was, that 4 weeks to 6 weeks that, that things really started to change. Yeah, when I arrived, I didn't even believe sobriety was possible. I thought that the people that worked in the rehab that were sober, I thought they were lying, or just keeping it quiet, that they drank on the weekends or whatever. I remember after doing my step one and writing down all these examples of times that I tried to have one drink and ended up drunk, and all the different aspects of the worksheet around admitting my powerlessness. And so I had it all written down, and a member of staff said, you do know if you work really hard at this, you'll be able to drink evenings and weekends. And I looked up at him with these big hopeful eyes like, really? And he went, no, what part of that worksheet makes you think you could ever drink controlled? And I had the ump at the time, but I can laugh about it now. It was funny.
You failed that test.
Yeah, that was Dan. Anyway, I left ECR, and I didn't really want to go back to being a chef, but that was all I knew. And I knew that I wanted to try and help others. And so my dream as a kid had been to be an art therapist. And I thought, rather than go off to art school and do all the stuff that I did at art school before, like drinking brandy and taking acid, I thought I'll train as a therapist. And so I went to college and I started doing some basic counselling training, and I really enjoyed it. And I was I think I was doing bits and pieces for work, and volunteering in a local treatment centre as well, and sort of trying to work out where I was at. And then I got the opportunity to travel, and I went traveling around the world, and I got to go to a restaurant in Cambodia where they rescue children from the streets, and children that would often be sold into the sex trade and terribly abused. And this restaurant would take these children in, and when they set up, they said to the children, what do you want? Do you want somewhere to live, or do you want to go to school, or do you want to work? And the children said, yeah, all of that. So they did that. They supported these children into work in the restaurant, and they had lessons and schooling for them and somewhere safe to live. And they set up a cooperative with the local cab drivers, who would look out for any young children on the streets to stop them being picked up by these evil people that sell them into the sex trade. And I went to this restaurant, and I had some of the food there, cooked by these children, and it was such a joyful place. All of the paintings on the walls were by the kids. The food was very, I don't know, it was just a really real feeling of joy. And I thought I'd love to be involved in something like this one day. So I got back from my travelling, and I continued my counselling training. And part of counselling training is you have to have a load of counselling. And I sort of realised in my own therapy that I didn't need to become an art therapist to appease the teenage boy I once was, because I wasn't him anymore. So it was a scary moment, because I sort of thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know who I'm going to be or what I'm supposed to do. And at this point, I was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years sober, and I sort of didn't know what I was going to do. And I was working at a homeless charity as a key worker in a homeless hostel. And one of the things that I found as a great way of getting people engaged was with cooking. And I would always do lots of cooking in the hostel. I'd get people to come in the kitchen with me, and it was quite a good way of helping people get back to work as well if they'd been, on the streets and so on. And I started to get donations. There's a producer of tomatoes quite near me. It's the biggest greenhouse in Europe, and they produce this vast amount of tomatoes. And they would give me about 40 kilos of tomatoes every week. And so I earned the nickname Tomato Dave. And I'd drive around with a car full of tomatoes, driving from church to church around Kent, where we'd hire out the hall, and I would cook with people a big, tomato pasta or a big tomato curry or any tomato recipes. I've done them, and I'd get people to come in the kitchen with me, and it started to grow. We started to, feed more and more people. More and more people would get involved in the kitchen, and I was really hoping to sort of, develop that and maybe try and replicate what I'd seen in Cambodia when I'd been traveling. And it felt like I was combining the skills that I had as someone who could help people as a trained counsellor, but also as a cook. So my job title was an employment advisor, but anything that I could do really to help people, particularly those who've been sleeping rough. So I continued doing that for quite a long time until last year, and the funding for my job came to an end, and so I got called into a redundancy consultation last summer in the charity where I'd worked for 11 years, and I was really worried. I was quite anxious about, because I've got a family and a mortgage and all those sorts of things and bills. So I was worried about what was going to happen. And I spoke to my sponsor, and he said to me, when one door closes, another one opens. And I think I told him to F off, like I felt like saying, no, don't you understand? I'm really worried. And I went to this redundancy consultation, and they laid down that, the funding had come to an end and that there would be other possible jobs that they could offer me, but I wouldn't be able to keep doing the things that I've been doing. And I came out of that meeting and I bumped into someone from one of the fellowships right outside. And it was a relief to see someone in that moment. And then we had a cup of tea and a chat. And then I had to go to another meeting. I had my redundancy consultation, and I was very nervous. And then afterwards, I met somebody from the fellowship, and it was really good to bump into someone in recovery. And then I had another meeting with a local restaurateur in Margate, and I was offered a job. So within an hour of my first redundancy consultation, I got offered another job, and it was to be head chef of a new restaurant in Margate that was set up to support disadvantaged young people in the area into employment. And so really it's, was my dream job. And what my sponsor
Did that kind of find you?
Yeah.
That just that wasn't something you went looking for. That just found you at the right time.
Yeah, and exactly as my sponsor had said, one door closes, another one opens. I spent the last 6 years or so cooking in some of the worst kitchens you can imagine, just any old church kitchen, you know, making the best out of what I could, and driving around with a car full of tomatoes and chopping boards and things, trying to help people. And suddenly I've got this purpose-built space where I can, you know, a really beautiful space where I can invite young people in. The walls of my kitchen are a whiteboard, so I can do lessons and write on the board about how to conduct yourself in a job interview, or things to remember to look after your mental health, or, you know, things like that while we're cooking together. And we do a lot of community outreach work, so we're working with a lot of asylum seekers in the area. And so I'm just, you know, so grateful to have been given that opportunity to be of service and to combine all of the skills that I have together to try and help others.
Still tomatoes are the main on the menu?
Sometimes.
So you lost your handle as well then, did you?
Yeah, you lost my handle.
So it's ex-tomato Dave.
Yeah, I still get some occasionally.
That's quite a lot of years. It would be nice, and that's fantastic the way that all come about. But again, underpinning that is your recovery, I guess, isn't there? That was only could possibly happen because of the foundation that you're building your life on.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit about sort of what you do in the background. I know that you got in a relationship, got kids and a family, and like you say, you got a mortgage. So I mean, that's all the real joys and gifts of recovery, and I guess they all got their challenges and ups and downs, and you know, just sort of what is it that you do, or what have you done as the years have gone by to learn to develop all of that and to sort of enjoy that successful life.
Yeah, I don't know where to start really. I got into a relationship too early, really, after I got into recovery. And I met a lovely girl, Claire, and we started to have a bit of fun. And then I said to her, I'm not supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to really get into anything in my first year of recovery. And we broke up. And then when I got to just over a year, when I got my first year AA chip, I chased after her and said, I'm a year sober now. And she was due to go travelling off around the world. And I said, you know, when you get back from travelling, let's give it a go. And she said, forget that, come with me. So that was what happened. I ended up, that's how I went travelling. I went travelling with her. And it was amazing to go to, the fellowship is all over the world. So I got to go to meetings in, all sorts of interesting places and meet lots of amazing people. And I think, like you said earlier, you just occasionally you hear these little nuggets, and they sort of sustain you and your journey. I remember I got a taxi in Bangkok, and I was going to get my like a visa added to my passport so I could travel in I think Vietnam or something like that. Well, I shared this taxi in Bangkok with this Buddhist monk, and he said, you'd be a lot happier in life if you want what you've got rather than trying to get what you want. And I thought, oh, that's amazing. That's so profound. And I said to him, who said that? Was that like Gandhi or the Buddha or something? And he said, no, Mick Jagger. It was, I was just, one of those things that happens that I just, it's always stuck with me. Well, when I got back from travelling, and was, on my journey and my counselling training, I was working a lot of hours. Claire had just become pregnant with our son. I think, by this point, our son had been born, and life was quite difficult. because I was doing my counselling training, which meant I was going to college 1 day a week, and then also on placement 1 day a week. And then I was working, when I wasn't in those places, I was working in hostels and quite often sleeping overnight in the hostels for extra money, and trying to fit my recovery and going to meetings around that was quite difficult. And I remember I used to be secretary of a Monday night meeting, but I kept missing my service because I kept getting offered shifts and I couldn't afford to turn them down. And I'd get people to stand in for me, and then I'd feel terribly guilty at missing the meeting. And my sponsor said to me that, getting sober and getting into recovery is supposed to be a bridge to normal living, and you're going to do your job so that you can pay your rent, because you're fully self-supporting. But it was something I really struggled with, trying to find the right balance of being of service and doing meetings, but also fitting in everything else. I remember at the time I was driving this car that kept breaking down, and I had to go to all these different places for my training and for my job, and then also, we had a baby at home. It was difficult. It's been when I look back, I think I don't know how I did it, to be honest. And those sleep shifts I used to do in the hostel that was full of bed bugs, and I'd get 25 quid for it. But it's just sort of one day at a time, and it putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, because I think it's like that, isn't it? If you the same sort of my story, that you learn that if you stick with it through the rough times, you get the smooth times, but you always seem to be developing as you're going along. And I think once you kind of notice, I don't know if you notice this, it's like I used to sort of notice that at the beginning I'd have these really the hard times would be getting harder and harder, and just as I thought I can't cope anymore, it would like almost switch, and then I'd have a really good time. But then as I was having a good time, it would become a hard time again, and then just I felt like I couldn't cope anymore, I'd be having a good time again. I didn't realise this wasn't life, this was the way that my brain was kind of like deciphering reality. That's the way that the stress would build up, and then for something would relieve it, I'd let it go, and then I'd feel elated. And even in your head, you get this with a lot of what we call the newcomers, is that they have this idea that when you're in that closed-minded place, you kind of get the feeling, it's always like this, it's not worth it, I'm sick and tired, and you become a real victim kind of mentality. And then the pressure pops and your brain opens, and you feel like almost ecstasy, and you're like, I've made it, and none of them things are actually true. It's just this opening and closing of the brain. But I kind of like depended on it. I kind of thought, it's going to get better at some point. But now what I've noticed, it's all kind of mixed together. The good and bad are all kind of mixed together. And again, it's just really about, I'm kind of one of them people go, is your glass half empty or half full? It's like, well, there is another option that suits me better. It's both. I'm both. I've got a glass half empty and it's half full. I'm happy about the full bit, but I'm not so happy about the empty bit. So when people go, how do you feel? I'm like, about what? It's like, overall, it's like, overall, I feel alright at the minute, but I ain't feeling so good about the kids in Cambodia getting dragged off the streets and terrible things. I don't feel good about people dying for things that, I don't feel good about being mugged off by the gas and electric companies, but I feel there's plenty of things I do feel good about, and I like to kind of acknowledge both of them, because again, it's that realisation, it's not what happens in this world, it's my response to it that's what's most important to me. And through working this program and having great people around me that can help support my unbalanced mind sometimes, I can respond a lot more in proportion to what reality that I'm facing, which gives you a bit more of a chance at life. But it is funny how it goes, isn't it? But you've got to stick with it. That's the thing I like talking to people like yourself, is that it don't stay the same, does it? That's the trouble.
No. You know, and I think, you know, speaking of that, well, I think when I got to, it was probably around 5 years, no, maybe longer, the relationship with my little boy's mum came to an end, and we'd become, I don't know, we were like brother and sister really, and it wasn't really working, and that the anger was coming out in ways that was difficult to understand. So, you know, I might get shouted at for loading the dishwasher wrong or whatever, but I sort of knew that's not what she was really angry about. But I think because of being in recovery and being able to be honest, we were able to talk about what wasn't working and what was working, and try and, you know, see a way forward. And we decided to separate, and that was very painful, and I found it really difficult. And I went to a lot of meetings and, you know, spoke to a lot of people, and it was I found it difficult, you know, because I'd quite a bit of sobriety behind me at the time, and I didn't want to sit in a meeting crying and upset, because I thought, well, that's not a very good message to the newcomer. You know, that geezer's 7 years sober and he's sitting there sobbing. But I think, you know, my sponsor said as well that I could show that you can go through difficult things and be sad and not have to pick up a drink. And so, you know, I got through it, and the relationship that I have with my little boy's mum is fantastic.
And the message that if you work hard enough to get 7 years sober, you're probably going to be crying as well. Because, see, this is the stuff about recovery that I really kind of, and again, I'm definitely going to get you back to do different subjects, but because again, it's like there's points in recovery that people at the beginning get the wrong idea. And I think that's one of the most difficult things that I say to people is like, look, I know you want it to be nice all the time and good all the time, but that ain't reality, and you ain't going to grow through that. And it is so difficult trying to explain to people in recovery, look, you're going to have to, look, it says pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth, but you want to avoid the pain all the time. How are you going to grow? And not only that, if you've got dysfunction, which most people have to varying degrees, some worse than others, that's going to come up, and you start to realise why you were drinking in the first place. That stuff that you've been stuffing down all them years, it is going to start to come up, but it is going to take some years. And that's the difficulty with it, Dave. So the next biggest relapse period after the first year is between 7 and 9 years.
I didn't know that.
And it usually starts around about 5 years with people. Yeah, well, again, you'll find that, again, this is sort of when you work in a rehab, you're in this mass experience, you kind of see the patterns, but they go on. And again, I think the comforting thing about knowing about these difficult patterns is like, it's not going wrong. It's showing that you're going in the right path. But it's nicer if you know, what should I be doing about this? Like, because again, it's like, it's quite sad to me that a lot of people, they're really good at doing bad, and they're not, and they're kind of more comfortable in that. And so for them to start doing good, they're uncomfortable, so they become self-sabotagers. And it's sad because just as they start doing good, the pressure builds, which is a good thing because it's like you're going to, I say before the breakthrough comes the breakdown. So learning to have good recovery, I think, is how do I have controlled breakdowns? The same as in relationships. How do I have arguments that aren't abusive? Because without having the argument or the disagreement, and then we can't resolve it, and most dysfunctional people, they try and avoid it, and then it just explodes, but there's never any real resolution, like you're saying there, that being able to discuss. And so, I think you can measure somebody's level of dysfunction by their ability to communicate, because we know that all good relationships are built on communication. So if I can't tell you how I honestly feel, no matter how uncomfortable I am, and I can't listen to how you honestly feel, no matter how uncomfortable I am, how are we going to resolve? And I think most dysfunctional people opt to, let's not do that, let's just learn to live with the dysfunction. Because that seems to be an easier, softer way, instead of healing from it. And so dysfunction's become more of a interest to me as the years have gone on, but it makes solving the addiction problem seem like small fry. Because it's so complex that we're so far behind in understanding how dynamic it is.
The guy who trained me as a counsellor, he said when they build the sea defences on the coast, they only build them as high as the sea will come in. And it's the same with your defence mechanisms that people develop. They've been developed out of a need to cope with something that was going on, probably for when you were a little kid. But you can see where those dysfunctions come from.
Yeah. Well, at least it's understanding. So this is where Gabor Mate is like, I kind of separate. I like a lot of what he says. I guess you're aware of him, but the bit I disagree with is like, I don't think it's the trauma, it's your response to the trauma, which I think you sort of highlighted at the beginning with your brothers, because it's like, well, they're all in the same environment, but they respond indifferently from me. And so I like to focus more on saying, well, that happened, but it's your response. And I think even the program's saying that, because it says in the 4th step, when we write down all the things that are bothering us and traumatising us, because again, I think if the 12-step program's working, it has to be a trauma treatment program. If people with addiction are traumatized, and so many people are using the program to be free of the trauma, the 12-step program is a trauma treatment program, partly. But it says when we look at our list of resentments or fears or anxieties or whatever, the first thing apparent is the world and the people are quite often wrong. But that's as far as we're getting. See, then it's my responses. It's my responsibility. It's my ability to respond that's my problem. Somebody abusing me is wrong, and no one's saying it's not wrong, but me hating them for the rest of my life is going to make me ill. It does. Whether it's justified or not, resentment's poison. And so it's my response, my ability to respond to the abuse that's making me sick. And I like that, because when you understand it, it puts the ball in my court. It's like, I don't have to no longer be a victim. I can change how I respond to the world and situations. And again, that's been an ongoing, because I think, like yourself, I'm quite a sensitive person. I kind of pick up all that's going wrong, and it bothers me, a lot of it, but I have to find better ways of dealing with it, because I can't afford to be resentful or too fearful. It just creates a lot of anxiety and depression in me, and I have to keep that stuff out of me, and I've got to learn, well, how do I respond better? It's like, again, I think for the first part of my recovery, nobody explained that to me, and I kind of discovered it when I was writing the program for the Rehab, Step 4 program, and I thought, in the beginning, because they were all trying to be super spiritual, I think, they kind of were sort of saying, or what I was hearing, whether they were saying it or not, I don't know, but what I was hearing was, whatever the problem is, it's kind of your fault. It's in you. What I didn't kind of realise, it was only right in that didn't make sense to me. That is, because I could see that other people were wrong, quite often wrong. And I had to, that was important for me to and the big book and them to acknowledge that, saying, look, nobody's saying they're right, but your response is wrong. And I think that's where step 9 really kicks in, because I think through, and again, I think most people don't do step 9, if I'm honest. In my 33 years, I think a very small percentage of people I ever met actually understand and practice step 9, because that step 9 has been the key to teach me how to start having them uncomfortable conversations with people.
Yeah.
And again, I realise also that becomes, you know, if I'm willing to have an uncomfortable conversation with you, who's also never had an uncomfortable conversation, then we're both learning the process. We're both learning how to process the things that we've never processed, that we've tried to avoid. And as we process it, then we kind of set it free, and it doesn't keep building up in me. And it's learning that to have healthy processes, but it's also learning, look, you're going to have a bit of a breakdown before the breakthrough, but that's a good thing. You just got to learn how to, you know, I've never stopped being angry. I would consider myself an angry person, but it's contained. And it can be quite creative as well. It's kind of motivates me. And why wouldn't you be angry in this world? Why wouldn't you be fearful? You know, why wouldn't you be a bit depressed? You know, that's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd be a bit of a psycho if you didn't have some of them feelings. It's upsetting, isn't it? A lot of it.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, a lot of working in a homeless charity. I've seen a lot of things, you know, in my career since I got sober. So I was talking about the separating from my little boy's mum, and it was the first time it felt like a relationship ending as an adult or a slightly more mature person than before I'd got sober. And I'd had relationship breakups before when I was drinking, where there'd be screaming and shouting and, you know, my stuff put in bin bags and thrown in the street and all horrible things. And so it was a big difference to be, you know, to be adult and to be talking calmly about how we were going to share custody of my son and co-parent him, and about putting him first, you know, above what either of us might want. And so that felt like a big change. And it was similar with my job ending last summer and being made redundant. In my drinking days, I got sacked a lot. I got sacked a lot of times. And again, it would be, you know, that kind of have my stuff in the kitchen, you know, my knives and my clogs and stuff thrown out, and, you know, get out, don't come back kind of thing. And last summer when I got made redundant, there was a leaving party for me, and, you know, I got a lot of gifts and cards, and people wrote really beautiful things, and the, you know, some of the people that had been homeless who I helped to get their lives back on track had written to me, and it was a really beautiful thing. And that's, you know, the difference is just, it's night and day, you know, between what things were like when I was drinking and what things are like now. And it's funny, you were talking about the step 9. So in early recovery, I went to go and speak to, you know, friends and family to try and make amends. And I remember making amends with, or having that chat with my dad. and saying to him, and he was aware of the 12-step program and about making amends, and he looked at me and I said, I'm doing this recovery thing, and he said, is this where you agree to come round and mow the lawn and paint the house to make amends? And I remember I said to him, oh no no, this is where I tell you I've stopped drinking and you hug me and tell me how proud you are. But so early recovery, I was so ego driven. I probably should have painted his house and mowed his fence, and that probably would have been only a small measure of making amends to him for the worry and stuff that I put him through. But really, now further down the line, I can see actually that we probably should have had quite an awkward, difficult conversation really about some of the things that happened when I was growing up.
Yeah, I find that, mate, with again, being around a long time, you get people calling 15, 20, 25 years, that sort of thing, in recovery that are still not using, but still got some issues developing, probably gone on to all kinds of medication, that kind of thing. And when you drill down on it, my first question to everyone is, how do you feel about your parents? And
I shouldn't laugh.
Well, it is kind of funny, to tell the truth, because my favourite answer is this: I'm all right with them. I hardly ever see them. But it's surprising how many people have never forgiven their parents, because people say, well, I forgive them. It's like, but have you? Let's drill down on that. Let's see if you actually have forgiven them, because again, in my experience, most people I ask that question to don't, and they've never made a proper amends. Because again, it's that difference, that Dr. Bob conversation. It's like, the powerless mentality is always thinking it's about them. What are you going to do for me? What did you do to me? And then we major on that. They did this to me, they did that to me, they did this to me. It's like, well, all right, well, it says in the 4th step, we're not denying they did wrong, but we're looking at your response. So really, if you were to make your amends to your parents in a proper way, you should probably be sounding like, not, oh, I forgive you for everything you did to me, which most people kind of think is that way round. It's more a case of, please forgive me for being angry towards you. I've been judgmental towards you. I've never been understanding, because what you also find psychologically is that people never take the switch from looking at your parents from the child point of view. And if you stay resentful at them, you're always looking at them as from the child. And you get this with people where it's like, it's trying to say, even to the children often, that the children of people in recovery could grow up very angry towards the parents, but it goes both ways. But you kind of end up having to give this idea to say, look, you are my child, but you're not a child. But you're still sounding and treating me like a child. You need to grow up. You're not growing up. And so when you take responsibility, then the amends should be, look, I'm really sorry for, I've been angry at you for over the years. And the effect of that is, I don't come for Christmas, I don't send you, I always used to find this was a real good test. It's like, what card do you buy on Father's Day and Mother's Day? Because when I used to go in the card shop on Mother's Day, I'd be wanting to smash the shop up and throw all the stuff through the window, and it's, what a wonderful mum, you're always there for me, you're always like, ah! I used to buy cards that you're a special mum and write needs on it. or you have to buy the blank cards. because I held a lot of anger towards them, which was making me sick. And then that effect was I wouldn't then, and they felt very guilty when they got older, but then you wouldn't let them be nice to you because they're doing that to try and relieve their guilt. You wouldn't go and cut their grass. You wouldn't make an effort to go out. I tell people that's why America's there. I think everyone trying to get away from their parents. It's like they do celebrate Independence Day. I'll say to people, do you realise that's from us? And so it's like, I think until you actually look at that side of it, the first people that you could possibly be resentful at, how is your relationship with your parents? And are you still holding resentment to them? Because again, you're probably not going to do so well in the rest of your life if you're harbouring that kind of hurt. So, and just saying I forgive someone doesn't actually mean you forgive them. I think just saying I forgive them, that's just the beginning of the journey. But then the action needs to follow.
I hear a lot of people in meetings talking about I made amends, or I did a step 9 or whatever, and often they're just talking about saying sorry. And it was something that was taught to me quite early in recovery, was that it's not making amends isn't about saying sorry. And for an alcoholic like me, I said sorry all the time when I was drinking. I'd go off and I'd just do awful things and borrow money and break things and all the rest of it, and then say sorry. And that's not fixing the sorry stop meaning anything. So the idea of, if you borrowed 20 quid, making amends, you're giving them 20 quid. It's not rocket science. If you broke a vase, you either replace it or you fix it, or if you can't afford to, you make a payment plan to, it's pretty straightforward, really. But the emotional side of that is more difficult. And I think, what I said further down the line with, my dad and with my brothers as well, was that, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not, you don't, if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be there. I'm reliable where I used to be not reliable. And it's a real gift of recovery to be that person that people turn to now, because I am reliable. My dad remarried it's nearly 6 years ago now, but asked me to be his best man, and it was I just felt like a big moment for our relationship and for me and my recovery, to be seen as acknowledged as that reliable person. I probably wasn't much of a stag do, but
No, but that's like them big accolades that are important in life. Again, I think, like you say, the practical things are a bit more obvious, or appear more obvious. It don't always go out that way when you're actually working with people. They just don't know that they're meant to do that stuff. It's kind of one of the things that I've also learned on my journey, because again, it's like being such a dysfunctional family at the beginning. You realise how ill-equipped they actually were for children, how emotionally ill-equipped they were for relationships. They just wasn't bad people, they were just ill-equipped. And so they were giving the best that they could, and they didn't know what they didn't know, because again, if you're ill-equipped and you've been brought up in a family yourself with a lot missing that's kind of essential for healthy growth, you don't know what it is. It just sort of gets replaced with frustration and anger, because something's wrong, but you kind of don't know what. And so I felt that, I grew up being ill-equipped, even, when I started to get sober and learning through the program and doing the step 9, doing the inventories, but also understanding how important the corrective measures are, that There was things that started to come up that I just didn't understand. You know, like I had a real issue with commitment. But I didn't know how to be committed. It had never been modelled to me. It was only into my 40s and a few relationships that I actually learned and realised what I needed to do to be in a committed relationship, which was to completely give myself. But I had nothing. There's no way I could have done that up until that point, and that probably took a lot of therapy, a lot of reading, a lot of understanding, a lot of different kinds of relationships to develop the capacity to where I could actually understand what that actually meant and had the capacity to actually do it, and then build a relationship on that. So I've kind of learned over the years, and it's something that sort of stuck out with what you were saying and your experience. You correct me if I'm wrong, but see, I never trained to be a therapist, and I never wanted to be a therapist. Not anything wrong with therapy, and I've done probably about 7 years of it on and off in my life, and it was beneficial to a point. But I believe that a lot of people just need good information a lot of the time, that they're just lacking good information. Now, the trouble with a lot of people I've met in recovery, they're not very good at receiving information, especially in a sore spot. You know, if I had 15 seconds left to live, and someone would say, what's the most you've learned? What's the most important thing you've learned about addiction that you can share with us? There's a lot of things, but I think this, if we can found it on this understanding, it's like I would have to say this. I might even get a T-shirt and a cup with it on. Now I'm saying it to you, and maybe even a baseball cap. They hear, but they don't understand. And that is quite a profound truth, that people with this problem, they really don't understand what they're hearing, but the body language sort of, you think they understand what you're saying to them. And so because I work with people with addiction and people that haven't got addiction, the difference being is this is somebody with addiction. Yeah, mate, you're going to have to stop shouting at her. 6 months later, yeah, mate, you're going to have to stop shouting at her. A year later, mate, you're going to have to stop shouting at her. 2 years later, mate, you're going to have to stop shouting at her. 3 years later, mate, you're going to have to stop. 4 years, mate, you're going to have to stop shouting at her. And then eventually you go, oh, stop shouting at her, it's amazing. But then somebody that's not in addiction, it's like, hey, mate, you've got to stop shouting at her. Hey, mate, I stopped shouting at her. It's amazing. It actually has a tangible effect on me when I work with people that aren't in addiction, because they understand incredibly quicker. And again, it's not people in addiction's fault. It's just like there's something wrong with their brains. But I think, again, understanding that, which is why I think the fellowships are so important, because hopefully it's kind of that bridge that you talk about. I see that very much as neural pathways developing. And, you know, with a normal person, they might develop at that rate. With someone in addiction, they sort of develop at that rate. That's going backwards, coming back. But eventually, once the connection's made... and again, I think what society needs to understand is that these brains aren't developing properly. But again, the good news is the bridge, which is the important bit, is the redevelopment of the neural pathways. You can pretty much get everybody over that bridge if you can put the right support around them and keep repeating. I think when you watch that film like The Matrix, when he wants to learn Kung Fu and he puts them goggles on and all of a sudden it goes and then I think in the future with Elon Musk neural link and all that they're probably going to be able to develop pathways a lot quicker, but until then we have to kind of do it more manually. And I think it's just normal human growth really, but there's definitely differences in people with addiction, especially if they got a sore spot, because they want to get around the sore spot, rather than say, come and look, we need to get that sore spot out of the way so you can start having the experience, so you can start developing. Because until you start having the experience, you're not going to develop. But you keep avoiding the experience because it's uncomfortable. And, sorry, that's what I was going to say.
You used to call it...
Go ahead, mate.
I remember in treatment you used to call them pussy wounds.
It's exactly what came into my mind when I was saying it, and that's exactly what it kind of is. You clean the pus out. So that was the question I was kind of getting to with yourself, because I noticed you didn't actually then become a therapist. You carried on being what you always were, was a cook. But you combined that into the experience.
Yeah, part of my counselling training, I had to work as a counsellor and on a work placement, and I was with the NHS working with people with serious lung conditions, and it was really hard. A lot of people with COPD and conditions that just don't get any better, and I just found it really tough and draining, and it didn't feel like I was helping as much as I wanted to be helping. I learned a lot about how to listen, but the place where I felt like I was being of service and using my skills was, in the homeless charity, and cooking with people.
So again, that's kind of more along the lines of occupational therapy, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's that. It's quite a common ethical principle, which is help others, and if you can't help them, don't hurt them. And then as a counsellor, they call it beneficence and non-maleficence, and there's lots of different ways of saying it, and lots of wise people have said the same thing, but basically help others, and if you can't help them, don't hurt them. And the kitchen and cooking felt like the best way for me to do that, because there were times where we're very entrenched rough sleepers with addictions and all the other traumas and mental health issues going on, where I felt like I wasn't making any impact, but I could still give them a bowl of tomato soup or a bowl of pasta or something, and it so it felt like at least I can do something in those difficult cases.
Well, there's lots of levels to human beings, isn't there? And again, probably food is one of the important. Even in our rehab, we realise getting people to cook together and work together and trying to make sure everyone got nice food and the best we could supply. I think it went a long way to caring for people, and it was like the heart of what you're doing is, again, I always like to make sure that the place was as nice as possible, that everyone cared as much as possible. Ultimately, you wanted them to understand the program, because I think that's the thing that's also going to keep them developing in the long run, because like we're saying, is like things change as you go along. I'm not reached in 33 years. I'm not on any like safe, wonderful, glowing, walking on air. I'm just at the next part of my development, facing the next lot of challenges that everything I've done up to now has kind of led me to this point. I've never been here before, and I'm having to deal with things that I'm not necessarily equipped to deal with, but I know that I'm equipped to develop the capacity to deal with it if I stay in the game and work through it and look for the people that have got more understanding than me, and learn to try and listen to what they're telling me, that I can redevelop. See, because I kind of like that. Again, I'm not against therapy. I just, when all people go, I want to be a therapist, I often say, well, I get that, and I'm not saying don't, but did you consider that I think there's a 98% need for personal development, for life coaching on all the different levels, because I find a lot of people are ill-equipped and they don't really need therapy, they need equipping, and it can take a bit of time, because I realise part of what I've done is create them environments for people to at least get tastes of, like we like people cooking in the project that never cooked before. When people like you turn up and bring a little bit of colour to it and make it exciting, and getting people on the maintenance team so they can do a little bit of maintenance, chopping firewood, helping with the cars. People would get the you're getting people to do all this stuff just so you don't have to pay them. It's like, well, not really, mate. It's pretty much 90% of the profit went into all of them projects that didn't earn any money, that everyone loved but nobody would pay for. But I realised for a lot of people, especially the sort of lower end of treatment that we were doing, that they were getting equipped emotionally, spiritually, how to start facing the world successfully. And I think that's when the brain really starts kicking in.
Yeah. And as a key worker, when I worked in hostels and those sorts of jobs, I can sit down with someone and put my arm around them and say, I think you're brilliant. I think you're really capable. I think you're a wonderful person. I can say that till the cows come home, and it won't make a blind bit of difference. But if they do a job, they go and, whether it's chopping firewood or chopping tomatoes in the kitchen with me, and I tell them, I really like the way you did that, or you led a team, so I think you're a natural leader, or you're a great team player, or whatever positive attribute I can spot in them, then their confidence and esteem comes on. Someone in the room said to me quite early on, you get esteem from doing esteemable things. That's, it's quite simple. My new job is a challenge. It's my first time professionally chefing in sobriety. And that has meant working around alcohol to give me more kitchen experience. I've been working in quite a high-end restaurant 1 day a week. So there's a lot of alcohol around there. And I was, again, able to have what previously I would have found to be an awkward conversation with my manager and ask him directly, what are your expectations for me with regards alcohol? And I just described it to him as that I have an allergy. So I can't, I can't have it in my body. I can't taste it, and I don't. And it was good to be able to have that kind of conversation with him. There've been moments where it has felt, or you could say triggering, to be back in that environment that I was just previous to getting sober, to going back to that environment where I was very unwell, which is the pressure of a very busy high-end kitchen. But it's also been good for me to see that I can manage those situations now differently to how I did before, and to serve, some really great food.
Yeah, I think it's that, isn't it? It's the bridge to normal living could take a little bit of time to develop. When you have a new experience, you just got to give yourself time to adapt to it. I think, again, I think that's where good infantry comes in. That you can find your points of responses that you're not overly happy with, and then you can review them and then start adjusting yourself to respond in a way that's more conducive to your values and your beliefs, and it usually works out pretty good that way. I think that's why I love this program, and spiritual development and personal development. I just love the fact that you can, because again, I've seen the most damaged people make incredible developments and become, like yourself, contributors back into society. And I really don't think, unfortunately, I think society doesn't have that expectation on a lot of people with addiction problems, that this person can reach great heights with the right treatment and the right help and the right support. And again, unfortunately, I think even some of the medications that they give people prevent them from being able to cross that bridge. But I do think that development is so important. And again, you're testament to that. And again, I think these stories are so important to people, especially in long term, that you've kind of gone through marriage breakup, relationship breakups, difficult, situations, good things happening, but finally also, I guess kind of living the dream. But that's taken how many years to get to that point, isn't it? It's like, but even then,
but it's very hard.
It's very hard, but I think that's a good message.
I've got my dream.
I think that's the message, and I think that's the message that people need to understand, because I think they're falling by the wayside because they think it's all going wrong because it's hard, because they're being told, happy, joyous and free. I'm like, well, I get it, but that ain't my overall everyday experience. Or at least not in that context that you think I'm going to walk around feeling like I'm on drugs all the time. I don't always feel good. Yeah. But I don't consider that a bad day.
Yeah, I have had, I've had moments of happy, joyous and free, and I've had, difficult moments. I like what you said about, the breakdown comes before the breakthrough. One of my good friends always says, no mud, no lotus.
And honestly, I do think that's one of the most difficult things for people in recovery that are often in full flight from reality. And I think that actually goes a lot deeper. And I actually think the trauma of existence is probably the worst trauma of all. And nothing actually happened in the physical realm to create that. It's just there because the reality of we don't know who we are, where we are, what we are, and the abyss that awaits all of us. If you come face to face with staring into the abyss, it's not a pleasant experience, and it needs to be resolved. If you somehow find a way out of denial, denial seems to be the obvious solution to life. Because I tell people, look, if you don't wake up screaming, you're not understanding this. Because it's tough, but it is life, and it is meant to be this way. And there's nothing going wrong when it feels like that. And you need somebody standing by your side when it feels like that to say, come on, man, let's just keep going. It's like this. There's a line in the Bible that says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, you are going to go through some of the valleys of the shadows of death. It ain't a great place. It's in the title, the valley of the shadow of death. Who wants to be there? But you are going to have to go. But you are going to, and it says, as I go through it, it's like, go through it, don't be trying to avoid it, and don't be pitching a tent in the middle of it. And then it says that I should fear no evil because God is with me, and I think that's the truth. It's understanding that, and I think the evidence, you can get evidence that it's not going good for me when it's going bad, but then you get the evidence, well, it is going good for you when something like that job just kind of comes to you. But I think I think the Buddhists kind of say it, that the suffering's really caused by the craving what you want and the aversion of what you don't want, and it's somehow stopping that process to stop judging the world by good and bad, because you're probably not right. And again, I think the program that talks about the moral infantry is not morals. It's trying to say, look, we need to readjust your value system on what good and bad is, what right and wrong is, according to your own conscience. And I think the more you kind of realise that journey, the suffering still exists, but I guess in that book, The Road Less Travelled, which is taken from kind of the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha is that life is difficult. That's just a fact. When you accept that fact, it no longer becomes difficult. It just becomes life. And your attitude starts switching from, instead of it happening to me, it's actually happening for me. But development's often uncomfortable. But see it as a good thing, not a bad thing that you're constantly trying to avoid. Some stuff you should avoid. Again, you've got to balance it out. Sometimes I'm suffering because I'm just a dick. And that's just pointless suffering. The only thing to learn from that kind of suffering is stop doing that. It's like spending 10 years on that lesson seems like a waste of time to me, but some suffering, it's like, look man, that's part of the journey, and I think that's why it's important to have the people ahead of you to say, mate, that's how it feels, bro, you're on the right path, keep going. So even like now you're in your dream job, there's still challenges. The development's not over yet.
It is very challenging.
No, I just
Sorry.
find this. Again, you realise that there's development needs to take place. Do you have a strong desire to run away from them sort of challenges?
No, sometimes. I think I got quite comfortable in my old job. You know, I'd been there 11 years, and I sort of thought, this is it forever now. I'm just Tomato Dave. I feed people and try and help them and just plod along. And so when, you know, there was a spanner thrown in the works and I got made redundant and had to change jobs, and there's a lot of, just a lot of uncomfortable change that sometimes I'm, oh, I hate this is horrible. And other times, oh my God, this is incredible. I'm part of this incredible new project, and, you know, and it's okay. It's okay. I feel both of those things.
I always, again, like that serenity prayer really kind of like speaks volumes when you sort of study it down. That, and again, having a mass experience with kind of lots of people, you can also see it playing out, and you know the real wisdom in it is that it says like, God grant me the serenity, the peace of mind. Now I always say to people, serenity, that sounds all nice and spiritual. When you go in them fluffy hippie shops and they got the incense burning and the crystals and it all serenity, this tea towel, serenity, little things, it all sounds, acceptance and serenity all sound all spiritual and nice and Easterny and Buddhisty, and it all sounds really nice. But it moves on. It says, so for acceptance, it takes serenity. It says, God grant me this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. But I honestly think most people kind of stop at that part of it, because the second bit, it says, but give me the courage to change the things I can. And so acceptance kind of needs a sort of certain amount of peace and serenity, which makes sense when you think about it, but change takes courage. And trying to discover, you know, I'm going to need some wisdom that I know the difference, because, you know, and certain people are really sort of, I think they're naturally lean to acceptance, and I think the whole world's kind of split in that. I think you get the East and the West, where the East is all about being accepting of your fate, accepting of your circumstances, and the West, we're all about changing and industrialisation and building but I think personalities are kind of like that, and so, you know, if I was to write the Serenity Prayer to suit my personality, it would be, God grant me the serenity to change the things I can't accept, because I like to, because it's like I like to change things. So, so learning to be more accepting is a bit more difficult for me. But again, helping people to change is what I love, and I'm kind of more geared to that. So even like that defect that I've kind of have because of the desire to control, because feeling so out of control in my childhood, when I handed it to God, He's used that defect in me for a good thing, to help people. So trying to help people change, again, not always getting it right, but that desire in me is has kind of been a bit of a driving force in my life. And the thing I know, that the people that just want to accept the things they should be changing, I get right on their nerves. and the people that and the people that are accepting the things that they don't need to be changing, then I struggle with them. But I'm learning to get again, I just want the wisdom to know the difference. Am I meant to change this or not? And I think really they're the only two things you only really need to be concerned about in life. Is this situation, do I need to accept it, or do I need to change? Now again, it's like, often it's like, I say to people, if they're having a bad relationship, I say, look, you need to change your relationship. Doesn't mean you've got to leave the job or leave the person, but you've got to change the way you're relating to it. And I think once you realise that, because you understand how to look at your responses and say, you know, this is a defect in my character that's making me uncomfortable in this position. But one, do I need to be in this position? Is this where I feel like God wants me for now? Because again, this is just another phase of my development. Like I say, in 33 years, I'm quite conscious. I'm at the front of my life, but it's changing. And again, letting go of the rehab for me was such a massive change and revelation that it's like, look, for me, this horse is dead. You got to get off it now. Stop whipping it. Not that it was dead in the sense of it was still making profit. It was still, you know, a viable business. It just wasn't for me anymore. There's something to let go of that. It took me kind of 4 years. And then, like yourself, a circumstance popped up that said, look, it's time now to let go. And I knew that this is my cue.
It's funny, when I left ECR, you said to me I could come back any time. And through my whole recovery, it felt like there's a safety net, you know, like I'm walking, I'm on a tightrope or whatever, but like whatever happens, there's that safety net there, because Lester said I can go back. And it's funny, when it closed, I thought, I know I'm okay, but it was like that net was gone. And then I suppose over time realising, no, I am okay. But it was an odd feeling.
Yeah, it was for me, mate. It's still unfolding, you know, because it was something that was good. And again, I think it was, you know, it was a vision that I'd had quite early on, but it sort of, the environment wasn't conducive to that anymore, and it was becoming something that I didn't want it to be. I liked it when all the projects were there, but with all the regulations and demand for money and increasing, you know, professionalism and all that, it just turned into something that I didn't want to be. So it's hard to shut it down, because even when it was running half full, it was still making a bundle of money. But it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life anymore. And again, so there's that development, and it's like, when I started out, it was so hard to get anybody off of drink and drugs, but it became easier and easier as time went on. But then I started to realise more about the dysfunction and the development, which again is why I liked all the projects, because it helped people. You know, I was about the long-term recovery, to stay as long as you need to. So we used to get paid for the first stage, a bit less for the second stage, but very little for the third stage. There was no money in it, but the third stage pretty much took all the money that the other two stages was earning. And you start thinking, as time went on, you're sort of subsidising through the private sector. And I thought, this is just not a very good relationship. So there's probably about 5 really good reasons why you come to that conclusion. I'd like to think ultimately it was just a natural end. You know, like, it was kind of comfortable in lots of ways. Like you're saying, in that job, it's kind of, the spanner comes in the works. It's like, you know, I was getting paid pretty well at that point, and you know, just shutting it down without hanging on and trying to sell it and all that sort of thing was sort of a drop to sort of no income and, you know, not being able to sell it or what have you. But I just knew it was a sacrifice that was right for me to make in that point, because I want to move more into development and helping people deal with the dysfunction, which is, again, incredibly complex, incredibly difficult. And I don't want to do it as a therapist. I do think there's a lot more mileage in occupational therapies. A lot of people just need good information and then support, and because that's what I've seen. Like, most people that have got what I'd call better have actually, their brains have recovered the capacity to develop. And I think, you know, the horrible feeling that most people are feeling is evolution putting pressure on them because they're not evolving. And I think once you start evolving again, that you're not going to feel so great, like I guess you're experiencing now, but you are evolving because you've gone into a different environment. And again, there's that sort of saying in there, and that was kind of been the thing in my life. You start off the small fish in the big pond, then you become the big fish in the small pond, and then you become the small fish in the big pond again. And you know, it's much nicer being the big fish in the small pond. And but then you start realising, but all that hard work qualified me to go into the next room.
True.
And I want to do well in this room. Yeah, I want to do well in this room until I become the big fish in this room, because I know as I'm doing that. See, what I learned at the beginning was, because I was full of ego and needed a lot more from other people than I need now, that, you know, and again, rightly so, helping people is a wonderful experience, but when I'm helping them out myself, it's like tying the rope around my waist, going up a level, and then letting one person come on the rope, 2 people come on the rope. Eventually what happens, they start pulling you down. And so you start learning that's not the right way to be. The right way to be is you go up to the next level, you get ahead of everyone else by getting on the rope the people before you have left, but then you tie the rope to a rock, and then the people that want to climb up it, and then you just carry on to the next level and do the same. Get to the next level, drop the rope down, and let them climb up. But it's not about me. And again, for you, it's not about ECR, it's not about any of that. But what I depend on isn't me. It's not you, it's not even this world. It's the creator of all of that I depend on. And that still creates some anxiety and fears and human responses, but ultimately it says in the AA book that, you know, if you're fearful, it's because you're trusting in your finite. You're limited. And it says that we have to shift our dependency to the infinite. where there is no end, and that opens that brain up, and that claustrophobic crushing feeling that can cause depression, anxieties, and all the rest of it tends to leave, because there's infinite possibilities. But I'll finish on this, mate. Is that see, I'm also at the same time, I always had a dream of being in a retreat. That I wanted to, like, at some point stop the rehab, but start running a retreat. So at the same time, that was all close, and I knew that was around 55 years old, and I knew that for maybe 20, 30 years. And around, in my 55th year, I bought this land that I'm on now, this 6-acre land, and I moved into that just as the rehab was also closing down. And it was almost, as I was living in it, I started to realise, this is my dream, this is my vision, this land is the retreat. But there was so much work to do. It's so overwhelming amount of work to do. It's like, I didn't want, half of me's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's too much, too many difficulties. And part of my dream always was having a red tractor. It was, and again, I won't go too deep into it because I haven't got any short stories, as you probably gathered. That this red tractor was always a very important image in my psyche that meant a lot to me. So moving onto this land, I also needed a compact tractor, which is like about half a size tractor. It's not like a lawnmower. It's big, about 3 times the size of a lawnmower, but about half the size of a tractor. So I'm building this. We completely renovated the main house, and I'm driving my tractor, moaning about how hard everything is. And then I felt this, which I think is God talking to me, or the Spirit talking to me, and it says, this is what it feels like to build a dream house. It's just uncomfortable. And then we got planning permission we got a guest cottage, a big barn we're going to turn into a group room, and then we got I got planning permission to build 6 shepherd huts, and I got a campsite area. So we probably could do like courses and groups for development and this stuff we're talking about for maybe 20, 30, even 40 people. But so I've got the planning permission, I've got the sewerage system in, I've got bases of 2 shepherd huts, the shed needs so much, there's so much, I haven't even got the money to do it. I don't even know if I've got the strength to do it. But you keep going, because you generally get there if you don't give up. And if you don't get there, it's like, I'm not overly bothered as long as I'm trying to live my best life. I'm overcoming the difficulties, I'm overcoming the battles, and and I think there's, you don't always succeed, but it's like, it's just nice to be clean, to be sober, and giving life a good shot. And like yourself, it inspires other people, and other people like coming here, and we're sort of always helping other people. Always got other people around us that we're supporting, helping. They're helping us, we're helping them. We're part of each other's sort of journey. And I like the fact it's not CQC registered, and I'm not being overly regulated and drained by the society that I live in. So it's so mate, I'll tell you what, I think we've gone on long enough, but mate, I definitely want to get you back on, mate, because there's some there's other topics I'd like to discuss with you. But again, like I say, David, it's so nice for me to listen to people like your story, knowing where you come from, and seeing that you're making it through all the trials and all the tribulations, all the ups and downs. And again, I don't know what it is, mate. People like it when I'm suffering. When I tell people I'm struggling, they seem to like makes them happy because they can relate to that. But we're overcoming, and I think and recovery is possible, and I think that is such an important message for people to hear. Like, not just in the early bit, but life in recovery is possible. And you're definitely evidence of that. So I really appreciate you sharing, mate. And again, we give it a little bit of time. It'd be great to see how you're getting on with your new position.
Thank you.
And the rest of your life. So, mate, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to sort of leave us on over to you.
Thanks, Lester. You sponsored me when I did that boxing. It was a couple of years ago now, and it was just one of those fitness things, and it was a cancer research fundraiser, because my brother lost his wife, and so I did the training, and it was really hard. It was much harder than I thought it was going to be, especially when we started sparring, and I was getting punched in the head. And then when it came to the day of the fight, it was at a venue where there were 1,000 people watching me get in the ring, and there were, I think, 20 fights, and my fight was the 5th one. So I was quite lucky that I wasn't like the 20th, but the 5th one meant I had to watch the first 4 fights before I got in the ring, and it was brutal. The first couple, guys were coming off with blood on their faces and, you know, getting knocked out in the first 30 seconds. And so I was terrified. And I've always, in my recovery, I've always prayed to be useful. So I've never said, like, can I be sober? I've always prayed, can you keep me useful? Which is the same thing, because I'm no use to anyone when I've had a drink. But yeah, so when I saw those people coming off covered in blood, I was like, oh, please make me useful. Anyway, I'm really grateful to have been asked, and really grateful.
Did you win?
No.
You won the fight?
No. I lasted all 3 rounds, but I lost on points. But I won the medal for raising the most money, so that was what it was about.
Well, that's the big win then. Mate, look, I tell people all the time, I think it's very healthy to learn to get punched in the face. I think it should be something that all children should get comfortable with, because it stops you getting bullied.
Yeah.
Gives you confidence, doesn't it, when you can have a rumble. But well done, mate. Anyway, I'm sorry to hear about your sister's wife. That's a pretty tragic experience.
Yeah, that was difficult. But, you know, I mean, thanks to, you know, recovery and to you, you know, I've been able to be there for my brother since he lost his wife, and, you know, everything really, I'm lost for words for, you know, what you did for me in 2008 and the beginning of 2009.
Yeah, mate. Well, just glad to see you, mate. The biggest reward again, like for me, mate, is to see where you're at now, and it's just fantastic listening to you, mate. It's a lot of hard work on your behalf. It's just, I think that's the most fantastic thing, and I'm sure you experience it, is carrying the message to people. So many of them don't want it or can't get it, and again, I think people like yourself is what makes it all worthwhile, because even just trying to help people in sobriety is very hard work, and it can, you know, there's a lot of setbacks and a lot of fails and deaths and destruction, and, you know, I think especially in this time where we, you know, you've sort of got the harm minimalisation being the order of the day, which again, not against, but I'm against harm minimalisation and no recovery. I think both of them are very important, and I think recovery, needs to make sure that people get their chance at recovery like yourself. Because again, if there was no places like ECR, then you may not have got your chance at recovery. And I think that's, in our area there used to be 5 rehabs, there isn't one at the minute. So when they were funding the rehabs, they were funding recovery. Now they're not funding the rehab so much. They're not funding recovery, certainly not long term. So there's a big important part of the puzzle that's being missed out. And again, for me, that's kind of what's important about doing these podcasts, is to try and carry the message and show people that, this sort of treatment is important, and a lot of people can really not just benefit, they become great benefits back to society. And in Scotland, where they didn't have many rehabs, they didn't have much recovery, and so they have a lot higher death rate, because people in recovery, they help a lot of other people, just trying to keep them alive, running them around, picking them up, giving them money, food, fags. And when you don't build that resource up, you lose a lot in the so around rehabs there is a higher success rate and less deaths. So it's just important anyway, just to put that out there. Anyway, mate, we'll leave it there. Good to see you, mate. Definitely like to get you back on, like I say, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done, mate, in your living successfully through all the ups and downs. It's not easy. God bless,
Thank
mate.
you.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah. God bless. That's the love.